Welcome back to Project Chana Power Hour. Each week we get together to learn and strengthen ourselves in our special mitzvahs of Kashrus, Shabbos, and Taras Mishpacha, as well as other halachos that are pertinent to women. Our goal is to prepare ourselves and our homes to welcome Mashiach. Tonight's learning is dedicated Le'iloi Nishmas Harav Yitzchak ben Harav Eliezer Tzvi Zev Alav Shalom. May his neshama have an aliyah. If you would like to dedicate a class in honor or zechus of someone, please reach out via our email to projectchanapowerhour@gmail.com. Please join us afterwards for Tzedakah Tehillim and the Mashiach Thought. We want to make an important announcement. There will be no class next week on Yotes Kislev, and also the following week on Chanukah. Be'ezus Hashem, we will resume on Gimel Teves. Learning never ends. This break is a perfect time to make up any classes you missed. You can log on to mikvah.org/powerhour or search us up on any podcast platform, as well as 24/6 at Project Chana Power Hour. Okay, so let's get started. For our first class on Hilchos Shabbos, we will be continuing part 12 of our series on Shabbos Davening, where we explore the meaning, Halachos, and Minhagim behind it with Rabbi Braun. Rabbi Braun is the Mara D'Asra of Crown Heights. Thank you so much for making time to be on our program.
Okay, as was mentioned, this is the 12th class, and we're moved on from Tfilos of Shabbos, and now we're up to the Suda of Shabbos of Friday night. Last week, we just touched briefly on the Shalom Aleichem, and we'll continue talking about Shalom Aleichem tonight as well. I just want to share, before we talk about the Shalom Aleichem, we mentioned earlier that there's not going to be a class for Yotes Kislev. So there is a Sikh of the Friedrich Rebbe which talks about Yotes Kislev, and in the context, in Likutei Diburim, he also addresses the Shalom Aleichem that we say to the Malachim. He describes a particular Yotes Kislev where the Alter Rebbe and a few other Talmidim of the Mezritcher Magid went to see Reb Mendel Haradaker, Reb Mendel Vitebsker. And when they walked in to see Reb Mendel Haradaker, Reb Mendel got up Meloikoi Masay full height. And he's quoted, and he said, the Rebbe meaning the Mezritcher Magid, explained many times this which it says in Kabbalah that neshamis are greater than malachim. We'll soon see how that's relevant to Shalom Aleichem. If when malachim come, we say boyachem l'shalom, we greet them, we say welcome for peace, and we say it mitoich simcha, out of happiness. So in passing, he's mentioning the idea that Shalom Aleichem is said in a state of simcha. What type of chedva v'simcha, what type of joy are we supposed to have when we say boyachem l'shalom when the shamas come? So presumably, the Reb Mendel Haradaker said this, greeting the Alter Rebbe and all the other Talmidim of the Magid, and he was telling them that there's a special Borechem Shalom Aleichem that we say for the Malachim, and now I'm greeting the Shamas Yisrael, that's actually even more. And then he goes on to explain in that Sikha that Malachim are called Malachi Hashalom. The reason they're called Malachi Hashalom, Malachim means messengers. All they are messengers. Messengers of peace. Neshamis are not Malachi Hashalom, they're Bailei Hashalom. They're masters of peace. Shalom means to connect. Neshamis are called Shalom. Chazal say on the pasuk, Shuvi Hashulamis. Shulamis is a name for Knesset Yisrael, for Yidden, and the reason Yidden are called Shulamis, they're the peacemakers. They made peace between Hashem and the world. So we have a Shalom Aleichem for the Malachim, but there's even more than that for the Neshamis. And we'll soon see how that's relevant to the words of Shalom Aleichem as well. We have 4 phrases in Shalom Aleichem. Shalom Aleichem, Bayachem L'Shalom, Barchuni L'Shalom, Tzeischem L'Shalom. Each one of them we say 3 times. The last phrase, Tzeischem L'Shalom, is to tell the Malachim goodbye. Some communities, they don't say this last phrase of Tzeischem L'Shalom. Why are we kicking out Malachim? So why should we say Tzeischem L'Shalom? In other communities, they suggest instead of saying Tzeischem, we should say Bit Tzeischem. When you go out, I'm not telling you to leave, you just came. But when you leave, you should go out in a peaceful way. You should bless me, I'll bless you, etc. The Machzas HaShekel, which is a Pirush on Shulchan Aruch, writes that although the Malach actually stays with us the entire Shabbos, but we still say the word Tzeischem L'Shalom, we say that whenever they're going to go, it should be a peaceful exit. The same way we say the blessing, Baruch atah b'vayecha, Baruch atah b'teisecha, you're blessed when you come, you're blessed when you go. So we could say the word Tzeischem, we don't have to change it to Bit Tzeischem. In Chassidus, however, it's explained that neshamas have a much stronger connection to Hashem than malachim. So what's happening here is the malachim are coming down and they're giving brachas to the neshamas, to the Eden. Barchuni l'shalom, they're blessing me. When they give us brachas, they actually in return receive from the neshamas. Kol hamevarech mizbarach. When you give someone else a bracha, you receive in return, you reciprocate, you receive a bracha. And that's the idea of tzeischem l'shalom malachim leave. We're moving on to a higher level, to the level of neshamas. So what we're really saying, in other words, is, and that's what's printed in one of the Einiklach of the Tzemach Tzedek writes in a Pirush on the Siddur. Tzeischem l'shalom malach Hashem means we don't want a malach. We want Hashem Himself. We want the Melech Malchei Amlachim. So malachim leave meaning because it's a level higher than malachim. The Rebbe's secretary, Rabbi Chadakov, Reb Chaim Mordechai Isaac Chadakov, was once by the table of the Frierdiker Rebbe. In fact, the Rebbe writes in his personal diary, in the Rebbe's Rishimus, the Rebbe writes that on this particular Shabbos, Reb Chaim Mordechai Isaac Neder Yor Chadakov was here by the table of my father-in-law. He describes what happened by the table. And after Shalom Aleichem, my father-in-law, the Frierdiker Rebbe said, why are we kicking out, saying goodbye to the Malachim right away? In other words, why are we saying Tzeischem L'Shalom? Because by the Malachim, every word, every letter is a whole entire thing. What that really means, what he was saying is, Malachim, every moment is precious. 1 moment is a very long time. The fact that they're staying for us even for 1 minute is a big thing. It's not disrespectful to tell them Tzeischem L'Shalom was already a big accomplishment that we're here till now. That's how the Frierdiker Rebbe explained it at the time. There's multiple explanations for the Tzeischem L'Shalom. Be that as it may, that is clearly the minhag, and of course we follow the minhag. I mentioned earlier about saying it 1 time or 3 times. The reason for saying it 1 time is why I have to repeat it. The reason for saying it 3 times is a lot of things in Yiddishkeit that we do 3 times to give it extra strength, extra power. Another explanation is because the Malachim are coming to check specifically on 3 things. They're coming to check that there's candles lit, that there's a table set up, and there's bedspreads that are chairs ready to sit on. And for those 3 things, we ask them to look and we ask them to give us a bracha, and therefore we say it 3 times. Shalom Aleichem is said on Shabbos, not on Yom Tov. If Yom Tov falls out on Shabbos, if Rosh Hashanah falls out on Shabbos, if Chol HaMoed falls out on Shabbos, the Chabad custom is to say the Shalom Aleichem quietly. Not only the Shalom Aleichem, but everything that's said before Kiddush, the typical Friday night structure before Kiddush, Shalom Aleichem, Eshes Chayil, Mizbel David, Do Yisudasa, all of that is said quietly. That wasn't always the Chabad custom. There are various customs in other communities. What is done when Yom Tov falls together with Shabbos? Are we acting like it's Shabbos or like it's Yom Tov? If it's Yom Tov, there's no Shalom Aleichem. Shalom Aleichem is a Shabbos thing that the Malachim come to see us Friday night. Is it Yom Tov or Shabbos? And some don't say Shalom Aleichem, some do say it. The Chabad custom was not to say it, and that's what was written originally in the Hayom Yom. And at some stage, the Rebbe asked to change the Hayom Yom. There was a modification that our Rebbe made to the Hayom Yom in later years, to be precise, in the year Tafshin Yud Zayin. I don't know what happened with the Malachim in the higher worlds at that year, but the Rebbe asked to make this change. I mean, the idea of the change came earlier and introduced the idea we should say it quietly. The reason for not saying it on Yom Tov, even though it's Shabbos, is one of the reasons is because it's disparaging to Yom Tov. It's not respectful to Yom Tov to sort of bring in this whole Shabbos Zmiros. So at a later stage, the compromise was that we say all those things, but we say it quietly. And Chassidus has a whole explanation of the order of the Shalom Aleichem and the Malachei HaShalom and the Malachei HaShadis and Bayachim and Barchuni, the higher levels, Chachma Datzil, Zunda Atzilis, bringing it to our Neshama, all those stuff. And the Shabbos get from us, we get from the Neshamas, etc., as we mentioned earlier. So we all do all those things on Yom Tov also, but we do it in a quiet way. There's a change in language. We call first the Malachei HaShadis, and then we call the Malachei HaShalom. If you look carefully, in our Nusach is very precise. The first time only they call Malachei HaShadis, Malachei Elyon, divine angels, but in Malachei HaShadis, angels of service. And the next 3 stanzas, it's Malachei HaShalom, angels of peace, Malachei Elyon, divine angels. So there's multiple explanations for that too. One of the explanations is the Malachim are called Malachei HaSharis for doing a job. They have a shlichus. They came down here with a mission. When we greet them, we call them Malachei HaSharis. They've done their mission. They finished their job. Now we don't call them any more Malachei HaSharis, angels of service. We call them Malachei Hashalom, angels of peace, because they're finished their shlichus. But there's a fascinating thing. There was a interview not so long ago where an individual, Rosh Hashiva Nar Sameach, I believe he is, Rabbi Jonathan Winner, related the experience that he had as a child, as a little child in Yechidus. His parents were in Yechidus. And in this particular Gem interview, he relates that his parents asked him if there's anything that he wants to ask the Rebbe. And he asked the Rebbe, why do we say Malachi Hashadas and then we change to Malachi Elyon, to Malachi Hashalim? And the Rebbe gave him a very interesting explanation. Now, this is a question that's addressed in many different svarim and in many different explanations, but this is the Rebbe's explanation, and it's a whole new way to look at the meaning of Shalom Aleichem. The Rebbe said he has another question. Why do we repeat and say Shalom Aleichem, and then again we say Bayachem L'Shalom? Shalom Aleichem is welcome. Bayachem L'Shalom is your coming is for peace. That's also a form of welcome. Why we're saying the welcome twice? And here the Rebbe told me there are two types of malachim. There's the weekday malachim and the Shabbos malachim. We've had till now weekday malachim, like we had in last week's parsha, that Yaakov Avinu had the malachim of Chutz La'aretz that walked with him to Eretz Yisrael, and then there's malachim from Eretz Yisrael came to welcome because there are two different types of malachim. So there's the weekday malachim and the Shabbos malachim. We need to first say goodbye to the weekday malachim, and then we welcome in the Shabbos malachim. The weekday malachim, the Rebbe said, are called malachi hashoris, malachim of service. They're here to work. Weekday, day of work. The malachim of Shabbos are on a much higher level. They're not malachi hashoris, they're malachi hashalom, angels of peace. So the Rebbe said an interesting thing that the word shalom aleichem, the word shalom in Hebrew is a word that you use for welcome and for goodbye. Shalom is goodbye. So when we're saying the word Shalom Aleichem, the first phrase Shalom Aleichem is to say goodbye to the weekday Malachim. It's contrary to popular understanding of Shalom Aleichem. I was once in someone's house and they were saying Shalom Aleichem. They walked to the door and he motioned goodbye, Shalom Aleichem, and motioned to all of them to say goodbye. That's the goodbye to the original Malachim. That's not how most people understand it. That's the goodbye to the weekday, the Malachi Hasharis. And then we say Berachem L'Shalom, and now we're welcoming the Shabbos Malachim, which are called Malachi Hashalom. And after we say the entire phrase of Shalom Aleichem, we move on with the pasuk, the two psukim Kimalachov, Yitzav Elach, Lishmarcha B'chol D'Rachecha, Hashem Yishmet Tzeisch V'Yecha Ma'at V'Adom is the two psukim, and these psukim are either corresponding to the Malachim, because the Malachim are leaving now, according to their interpretation that they left, or alternatively, this is for the person also needs a yid down here, also needs shmira, and the malachim are our shoymim, our protectors, our guards, and these phrases are for us, for the shmira of a person down here. After that comes the song of Eshes Chayil. Before I go to Eshes Chayil, I will mention that a couple of years ago was popularized tune for Shalom Aleichem. It was printed many, many years ago, but for some reason nobody noticed the notes. There's a Chabad book, which in the back there's notes of how the Frierdiker Rebbe sang Shalom Aleichem. A lot of Chassidim used to just say the words, or they use some other tunes, not Chabad tunes, for Shalom Aleichem. There were Chassidim. I will say there's a rumor that a great Chassidim of the Tzemach Tzedek that didn't even bother saying Shalom Aleichem because they felt we're much higher than Malachim. Why are we saying this whole tefillah for Malachim? But that's a very high madrega. By us, it's printed in Alter Rebbe, so we say Shalom Aleichem, whether in a song or words. But just a few years ago, someone discovered, I know the whole history, how this happened. He got someone to read the notes in the back of this book, and that's notes of the tune that the Frierdiker Rebbe said for Shalom Aleichem when he was for a couple of weeks after the release of the Frierdiker Rebbe. He was in a place called Malachavka, and someone was present with him, and he heard him sing Shalom Aleichem with this particular tune. And that became a very common Chabad tune. And if we have our tune, we don't have to sing other tunes. And that's a tune of Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Asheres, Malachei. Anyway, that's the tune for Shalom Aleichem. I'm just putting that out there for those who want to know. Afterwards, we move on to Eshes Chayil. Now, in many Siddurim, there's another tefillah, which we don't say, a tefillah called Ribono Ha'olamim. The Alter Rebbe did not include it in his siddur. It's a whole prayer, davening to the Eibishter and asking blessings that we should do tshuva, we should have a good year, we should have a good Shabbos. And the Alter Rebbe was very stringent in his siddur, and this is a halacha matter to know that there's an isra on Shabbos of bakasha sracha. You're not allowed to ask for your needs on Shabbos. Now there are, and that's why we don't daven the Shemoneh Esrei, the regular tefillah of 19 brachas. We say a 7 brachas Shemoneh Esrei, which doesn't include all the requests that we have on a regular weekday Shemon Esrei. The Alter Rebbe was very, very machmer about that, and anything which has any iota, anything which has associated with Bakasha Srachav has been cut out in the Alter Rebbe Siddur. So naturally, the Rebbeinu Olam will not be there too. Those who do say that have all different justifications why this is not called Bakasha Srachav, various explanations. Some people actually don't even, in this prayer, Rebbeinu Olam, you'll find that another Siddur, they don't say the entire thing. In the beginning, it's not really a prayer of requests. It's just the introduction to the prayer. They say only to the first couple of lines until the words Melech Tamim Darka. Some say all of it. And other people claim that Bechlal, this prayer was actually not even supposed to be said Friday night. It was supposed to be said Friday afternoon when you finish doing all the work for Shabbos. Well, maybe that's why a lot of people don't say it, because they never finished doing everything for Shabbos. I mean, that was said in jest. Moving on for the Rebbeinu Olam, which we don't say, we move on to the Eishes Chayil. These tefillas are of Shalom Aleichem Eishes Chayil. Shalom Aleichem is found in a sefer called Tikkunei Shabbos. Tikkunei Shabbos is a sefer that was a first original Zmidas, and that was instituted by students of the Arizal to say the Shalom Aleichem. We don't have it from the Arizal himself. Eishes Chayil is a pasuk in Mishlei. Nobody has to institute it, but the question is why we're saying it Friday night, why we're introducing this kapitel in Mishlei Pedek Lamed, which has 30 psukim, which has, not 30 psukim, kapitel, the 30th chapter, and has psukim corresponding to every one of the letters of the Aleph base. What's the Eishes Chayil, the woman of Al, who's that referring to? So, one of the explanations for saying Eishes Chayil, the Zohar says that Shabbos gives sustenance and flow for the whole entire week. And it says in this phrase, in this Eishes Chayil, we talk about Vatokom ba'od laila, Vatitein terev levesa v'chayk. The woman of valor gets up in the middle of the night. She supplies food for her family and for her children. Now, in Sfarim, in Zohar, in Kabbalah, we say that this pasuk refers to the Shechina, the level of Malchus and Atzilus, which gives food and sustenance for Knesset Yisrael. So the Zohar says that this is what Shabbos does, and therefore it's appropriate to say this tefillah on this kapitel on Shabbos, corresponding to the Shechina, to Malchus and Atzilus. And some people say very simply that it's corresponding to the Shabbos. Shabbos is also not only the Kabbalistic thing, it's the Shechina, it's the level of Malchus, etc. It's also the simple thing that Shabbos. Shabbos is called a Kala. Shabbos is our Bazug, is our Kala. We are a couple. It's Yidden and Shabbos. And we joined every day of the week has a pair. Sunday has Monday, Tuesday has Wednesday, Thursday has Friday. Shabbos is alone, and Yidden are alone, and we join together as a pair. There's Eishes Chayil is not a unique thing for men to say. A woman could say Eishes Chayil too. We mentioned last class that the Shalom writes about Shalom Aleichem. Kol ish v'ish, every man and woman should say it. I don't know why a lot of women don't say it. And Eishes Chayil is not. It's not something that a man is supposed to say to thank his wife for all the work that she did on Friday preparing for Shabbos. But there is also that explanation. There's this explanation that we want to thank the woman who's the Akeres Abai, is the mainstay of the home. She's working the whole week, and especially on Friday, preparing the home and setting it up for Shabbos. So here's our time to thank her and talk about the merits of the Eishes Chayil. But the Kabbalistic, and that maybe, if that would be the only explanation, it wouldn't make sense for a woman to say it. But since there is the primary explanations that it has to do with the Shechina, with the level of Shabbos, therefore it could equally apply to women as it applies to men. There's a lot of explanations of Siddur on the Pesukim of Eishes Chayil, but that's not the purpose of the Shir. The purpose of the Shir is to familiarize ourselves with the structure of davening and the Suda Shabbos and the associated halachos. So, but if you're interested, there's a lot of Siddur on these Pesukim, including the pasuk that I mentioned earlier, Vatitein teref levesa, that it wakes up in the middle of the night, the woman wakes up and gives food to her family. The word teref, it's brought in Chassidus, is the same, is 289. There are 288 sparks, plus one is 289, and that's our job. Malchus Atzilus is elevating the sparks, and so on and so forth, so many explanations like that. After Eishes Chayil, we have the phrase, the prayer of Mizmor David. It's a kapitel Tillim, kapitel Chav Gimel, the 23rd chapter of Tillim, which talks about the midah of bitachon. It's a very important tefillah to know and memorize and say, to strengthen our bitachon, to know that everything's in the hands of Hashem. We say it in davening Friday night, but we say it again at every meal of Shabbos. The students of the Arizal instituted this idea that every meal of Shabbos we should say this kapitel Tillim, Chav Gimel, Mizmor David, Hashem Roi, Hashem is my shepherd, like extra, I'm never going to be missing anything. It has The amount of words in this kapitel is 57 words. The gematria is Zon. We spoke about it when we spoke about the Minhagim Davening. Zon means that Hashem sustains us. The amount of letters that are in this kapitel is the amount of the word bracha. That's 227 letters. The gematria bracha, blessing. It's a tefillah which has in it all about Hashem sustaining us, Hashem blessing us, etc. In Shulchan Aruch, in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, talks about a minute to say Mizmor David every time we eat, not only on Shabbos. And there's a whole discussion because some people would wash their hands for Hamaitzi, then say the Mizmor David, and then eat Hamaitzi. That's sort of making a break between the Tils Yadayim and Hamaitzi. And there's a discussion if that's legit. It's not a minute. We try to avoid making a hefsek. We don't say Mizmor David between the Tils Yadayim and Hamaitzi, if at all. The reason why people would say Mizmor David when they're eating, before eating, first of all, you're supposed to have Torah said by your table. So Mizmor David is Torah. At least there's some Torah being said. But also, it's a tefillah for us to have food. The Zohar talks about the importance before you eat, daven for your food. Because we need to appreciate that the food is not just there on the table because it's there, because the wife prepared it, because the delivery boy brought it from the pizza store. The food is there because Hashem is providing us with food. And even when the food is actually sitting on the table, before we start eating, we daven to Hashem to make sure we have food. The Rebbe spoke about this multiple times, and he spoke about the idea, how could a person daven for food when he knows his food is on the table? Because he knows that Hashem creates the food again every single moment. The fact that my slice of pizza or sushi is on the table a second ago doesn't mean it's going to be the next second. Hashem is constantly creating it. That strengthens our relationship with Hashem. And I'll be talking that's particularly negated when we're eating, when we enhance our nefesh Bahamas to understand that idea. Be that as it may, we don't say it regularly during the week, but we do say it on Shabbos al pi Kabbalah, specifically associated with Shabbos is the source of all our food for the whole entire week, and therefore we say it on Shabbos. It's also appropriate before we set up the table, before we eating the meal. Tardech lefanei shulchan, it talks about the table being set. It's done right before Kiddush. It has the words koisi revoya. My cup is a cup of sustenance, and in the Gemara it says that this actually word revoy is bigamatria 221. This is David HaMelech saying that his cup was 221. He had a very, very large cup of 221 lug. A lug is 4 times the amount of a minimum Kiddush cup, and this is 221 times that. So it's a very large cup, and that's going to be the cup that Mashiach will have, David Malka Mashiach, when Mashiach comes. Chassidus explains what's unique about the number 221, and that's the gematria of the word revoya. And after Mizmor David, we have the introduction to Kiddush, and then comes Kiddush to be continued. Mr. Shem, next week we'll talk more about the structure of Kiddush and things like that. Not next week, sorry, 2 weeks from now.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Braun. And for our next class, we will be continuing our series on the Halachos of Nursing, Part 2, with Rabbi Tuvia Kasimov. Rabbi Kasimov is a Rav in Crown Heights, and we are grateful to have him back on our program.
Baruch Abayim. So, Mirz Hashem, today is the last share when it comes to the halachas of nursing. And I do want to mention that a very important point that Harav Yitzchak Zirkin, Zichreinu Livracha, wrote a very, very, very chashuv kuntras on the halachas of nursing. So definitely whatever we're covering in the shir is for sure, there's a lot being covered. But of course, there's definitely much more to this sugya, to this topic in Torah. So whatever was not covered in the shiurim, as time is limited, it's definitely all available in Harav Yitzchak Zirkin Zichreinu V'Racha's Kuntres. I believe it is available on mikveh.org. And Mirz Hashem, this shir should be Le'iloi Nishmasei as well. And as we started last week, I would like to give a bracha to all of those Mirz Hashem who are waiting to be able to be mekayim these halachas, Mirz Hashem, that it should be bekarev, be'itei u'bezmanei, and it should go in a very, very smooth way, Mirz Hashem, and everybody should have everything that they need, b'tei v'nirva nigla, and the bracha should come down all the way, begashmias, it shouldn't just stay in the eilames l'yenim, there should be tangible brachas, Mirz Hashem. So today we're going to be focusing on the halachas of Shabbos, and nursing and Shabbos. But before that, I wanted to point out that just a few small ha'adas that we didn't get to mention last week. And so last week we started off with a very important point about, actually it's a halachic obligation for a mother to nurse the children. It's something that again, we had a whole discussion last week in the poskim. It brings down, can we even force a person to nurse? Of course, in today's day and age, that doesn't. It's we're talking about now in Lashonos of the poskim. Today's day and age, it's a different seder. Today's day and age, it's not really the common practice, but we're talking about the way the halacha is in the time that such practices were done. But we see how strong, how important it is, the union of nursing. Ad kedei kach, there's a whole discussion on whether or not a person is mamish obligated to nurse their children to the point of they can even do so against their will. Ad kedei kach. That's how important it is, the union of nursing. So what's fascinating is, I wanted to mention, is that there's a whole discussion amongst the poskim of how long can a child nurse for, until Chavdal and Chedesh, until the baby is 24 months old. What happens if it stops? If the baby doesn't stop nursing, can you just continue? So that I would defer to the Kuntris exactly to see at what point does a person have to stop? Does a person not have to stop? But the point that I wanted to discuss today was that what's fascinating is there is one opinion which quoted that if a child nurses way too long, mamish just continues and continues nursing, that it's brought down, it's not the best thing for the child. And what's fascinating is the commentary from the other Gedolei Poskim, when they saw such a statement, which was made that it's not the healthiest thing, it's not the best thing to do, the lashon that they used was to refute that it's to'us hu biyadam, it's a mistake to make such a statement, and they say it's an isser to wean a child off before they are ready to go. Again, if somebody has a reason that they need to wean the baby off, they're not handling that, it's too much for them. Of course, that's not what we're talking about. I'm just trying to bring out the point where we see how special and how important it is, the inyan of nursing. And if one is able to, how much one should be mishtadel to go ahead and do so, that even when it was quoted by one of the Paiskim, they wrote that if you're nursing for too long, it's not the best thing for the child, how strongly some other Paiskim, they refuted that, and they say, Adraba, that a child that nurses for a longer time, it makes the child more muksher for Torah, it only helps the child beruchnius, so definitely there's tremendous benefit in not only in halacha, but we see also beruchnius, how much the teyelis, how positive, what kind of positive effect it can have for the child. Just one more point, and then we're going to get to the halachos of Shabbos. The halachos of nursing, it's important to point out an extremely fundamental point, is that the milk is parv, right? We're always careful not to mix, of course, bas b'cholov, we have everything separate, but the mother's milk, al pi din, is considered parv. It is not considered milchig. So technically, after nursing, if the baby is already taking a certain level of food, there's a mamish no problem at all to give the baby basar mamish right after, to give actual fleishiks right after. B'chlal, the amount of time that a child has to wait, that itself is a discussion for itself. That's not for the topic for now. But if somebody has a bottle and they're washing it out in the fleshika sink, the halacha is it is not milchig and it's not going to render any kalim, any vessels in the fleshika sink. It's not going to make any shilas and kashrus at all. The milk is 100% parv. Okay, so with that hagdama, we're going to Mirz Hashem start discussing the halachos of nursing on Shabbos. So, to understand a little bit what the shaila could even be, because a lot of people, either they know, or a lot of people may not be so familiar with what exactly is the issue of nursing on Shabbos or of pumping on Shabbos. It's a very, very common question. So let's start a little bit. The Gemara discusses the halacha of milking a cow on Shabbos. And we're going to see if we can compare regular nursing or pumping to the prohibition of she'ivas cholov from an animal, milking a cow on Shabbos. So the Gemara has this discussion in the Masechta Shabbos, Daf Tzadik Amud Aleph. We have the Rambam, and the psak is that there's an isra of mefarik, right? One of the malachas is dash, And the Tulda of Dash is mefarik. So it's an Issa Deiraisa to milk an animal on Shabbos. There are those Gedele Rishonim that paskin that the reason why it's also is not necessarily from mefarik. It could be other reasons. Some say it's memachik, some say it's geizes, some say it's a Tulda of Teichen, some say it's Beirer. Whatever it is, most Paiskim hold that there's an Issa Deiraisa of milking a cow, milking an animal on Shabbos. There's one opinion that holds it's only Nissan Rabbanon, but the accepted consensus is it's an Issa Deiraisa of Mefarik. Now, the question is, what about a child nursing? Is that an Issa Deiraisa or is that an Issa Rabbanon? Can we really compare the two or not? So the answer is, of course, definitely there is an Issa involved. However, it's being done, it's mefarik kila'acher yad. It's not the normal way to extract milk from. That's not the normal. She'ilas cholov, hanaka, nursing is not the regular way to extract cholov from a person or from an animal. So since it's being done in a way of hanaka, of nursing, as opposed to actually physically using the hand to remove the milk, so therefore, it's not necessarily the same Isser, the same level of Isser, which was discussed in the Gemara by an animal. So it makes it a little bit easier. So therefore, we have a klal, we have a general rule that since a child needs the food and they're relying on this food and they have no other food, or even if they have other food, but this is really the natural food which the Eibishter provided and created for this child, so on Shabbos it is permitted to nurse for the Teivas Havlad for the purpose of the child himself or herself. So that is why we are allowed to nurse on Shabbos. So even though technically a malacha is being done, but nevertheless, since it's only done kil achayad, and it's only a Isser Drabanan, and it's Isser Drabanan kil achayad, so therefore that is the reason why we are allowed to nurse on Shabbos. The Pais can bring down that if a person needs to clean themselves before they start nursing, so one is allowed to clean themselves before nursing, to clean the area, just to be careful to try to use a cloth which is not made from cotton or anything which absorbs, to try to use something which is from a synthetic material which does not absorb, so there shouldn't be any questions of schita. If a child, you need to get the child in the mood of nursing. Sometimes the child does not want to latch, sometimes the child doesn't want to start the process of nursing. So it's brought down in Simon Shin Chav Ches that the mother is allowed to extract a little bit of cholov, a little bit of milk into the mouth of the child in order to get the child to want to have the desire to nurse. So that is permitted on Shabbos. So even though technically we just said that seemingly there is a prohibition on Shabbos to go ahead and extract milk from the body, but if it's going straight into the mouth of the child and it's for the purpose of getting the child to nurse, then the place can bring down, it is 100% okay. This is a permitted thing to do on Shabbos. What happens if the child is not nursing? The child is not, he's not able to nurse. The child is not, for whatever reason, the child is not taking the mother's milk from the body. Can we go ahead and nurse? Can a person go ahead and nurse and to collect the milk and to prepare a bottle for the child? So this is a very, very, very important question, which is discussed in the Paskim. And the bottom line is that it is something which is permitted. Meaning to say, so one is going to be shav chalav, one is going to collect milk from the body. So it's not going directly into the mouth of the child. It's going into a bottle, and the child is going to take the bottle. We're going to discuss exactly what is the correct method to do so on Shabbos. Of course, it's not going to be the same way that it's done during the weekday, but this is all in a case where the child has no other food. There's a big, big debate amongst contemporary Peskim, amongst contemporary halachic decisors, whether or not, if somebody has formula available, or they're able to buy and to purchase formula before Shabbos, does that change the halacha? So we just mentioned that if there's nothing else available, and that's the only way that the child is going to be able to eat, so you could pump in to a vessel, into a container, and feed the child the milk. The question is, are you obligated to go ahead before Shabbos and purchase formula or not? So this is a very, very sensitive topic. A lot of mothers they're very, very adamant that the child should only have specifically their milk, and we know clearly that there are tremendous benefits specifically to the mother's milk over formula. So the answer is this is something which is highly debated amongst the poskim, amongst today's contemporary halachic decisors. There are those that say that even though technically you may have formula available, but ultimately, what does a child need? The child needs the milk which is mina shamayim, so to speak, custom tailored for this child. The Eibishter created milk which is exactly what the baby needs, and there's nothing which is factory made, which is manufactured, which could replace that. So therefore, this halacha would apply even in a scenario where formula is available. Nevertheless, there's nothing as healthy and as good for the child as the mother's own milk, and therefore the halacha would be that even if formula is available or one could purchase formula on Erev Shabbos, nevertheless we would still say you are allowed to do so, to collect the milk on Shabbos and to give it to the baby, even though it's technically not being done in one action. You're collecting the milk into a keli and then giving it. You would still be allowed to do so. Others argue that in today's day and age, Baruch Hashem, there's no sakana savlad, there's no danger to the child if he doesn't have the mother's milk. And Baruch Hashem, the Eibishter created such a wonderful system that we do have today other forms to keep the baby healthy, for forms of food, of nutrients to keep the baby healthy. So Baruch Hashem, I'm going to leave this for every single individual to ask their own Meidahira. Obviously, this is something that needs to be discussed case by case. If the doctor says the child needs specifically the mother's milk, they're adamant you should not be giving formula. The child needs it; he needs the mother's milk. So obviously, that is an extremely important factor which needs to be communicated to the Rav. And any other factors one must share with the Rav, and each one should do exactly the way that, according to the Psaq, they should receive. I'm just presenting both sides of the coin, so at least people know what the questions may be. So let's get to the next point of how should the milk be collected. But before that, there's another important factor which we need to discuss for Shabbos. What happens if, Baruch Hashem, the child has what they need? However, there's an overflow of milk by the mother, and she needs to release it. Otherwise, chas v'shalom, it could cause an infection, or even if it's not going to cause an infection, but it's putting the mother in tremendous pain. So the halacha is that one is allowed to pump on Shabbos itself just for the purpose of pain relief. Or another example is if somebody does not have enough supply. So the poskim discuss is if one is pumping just in order to keep the body used to producing more milk, this is another legitimate reason why one would be allowed to pump on Shabbos. Exactly how it's done, we're going to discuss in a minute. Another important point is that the poskim say if a person needs to take medication, as we know in Siman Shin Chav Ches in the Shulchan Aruch, there's a whole siman in the Shulchan Aruch discussing if a person is allowed to take medicine on Shabbos. So if it's to prevent infection, and the poskim write, of course, this is something that one is allowed to take these pills on Shabbos itself, to save and to prevent any engorgement or any chashash of and any concern of infection, chas v'shalom. So this is definitely something which is allowed. Now, when it comes to, let's say a person has a heter to pump for the child on Shabbos, that the Rav paskin for them that this is the milk that the child should be having, and they should not be taking formula. Or if somebody is pumping for the purpose of pain, to alleviate themselves from pain, or to take away any chashash, any concern of infection. So in general, there are two different ways that it can be done. Either one can use a hand pump, or one can use an electric pump. So there's a famous debate on what is better, what should be used. One argument is electric is obviously better, because electric, it's only one press of a button and everything else is happening by itself. As opposed to a hand pump, you are actively, constantly doing the action of pumping. You are causing an action every single time that you are pressing the pump, that you're pumping. That action itself is an isser every single moment. So definitely electric is better because all you do is you're pressing the button and it's going automatically by itself. So this is definitely the consensus of the Paiskim that electric is better. Some people they're more afraid to use electric because it's electricity on Shabbos, but once you understand the cheshbon behind it, that it's only one time that you're pressing the button and the action is happening by itself, so then you see that, it's actually much easier, it's much of a lighter Isser, so to speak, than a person constantly activating the pump by hand and actually doing the process of pumping themselves on Shabbos. So what's the case if somebody is stuck? They forgot their electric pump, they don't have access to it, they only have a handheld pump. What do? Are they allowed to pump regular? Are they obligated to try different methods? So the post can bring down that, of course, if it's possible to have a non-Jewish lady come and help during the process, that is definitely preferred. Again, practically this could be a very, very uncomfortable thing. It's to tell somebody to have another lady pump for them. It's a very, very, it's Pasha Kavod Abriya, so a person can feel extremely uncomfortable from that. So definitely that's not necessarily an option which most are going to take. I'm just bringing down what it says in the Paskim. The Paskim do bring down that if it's a possibility, if a person feels that they're able to do so, and they have a non-Jewish lady who is able to help them out with that, a nurse or any other registered medical professional, that is definitely a good option according to halacha. If one is not able to do so, meaning to say they don't have it available, or it's pasha kavod abriya, they don't feel comfortable to have such a thing being done to them, so then the halacha would be that one would be allowed to do so, kila, meaning to say that they would do the action of pumping not in the regular way. They would hold it not in the regular position, and the action of pumping they would push not in the regular way. It would be done kila. This would be an acceptable way to pump, of course, if there's no other choice. In the case, going back to an electric pump, so if it's possible to set it up on a timer, this is absolutely the best. You set the timer before Shabbos, you have your set times. When you are pumping, then that's mamish the easiest. You apply, the pulse can bring down that one should apply the machine to the body first, before the timer goes off. That way, when the timer goes off, you're not really doing any action of putting the machine to the body. It's already there, and the machine is going on by itself, and it is going to do all the work for you. Another extremely important point, that if one is not nursing for the purpose of actual nursing, meaning one is pumping for the purpose of just alleviate pain or to prevent any infections, chas v'shalom, so the poskim do write that it's extremely important. This is also very, very hard for many mothers to do, but that the milk cannot be used, it cannot be saved, meaning to say we're allowing the process of pumping, but the milk cannot be used. So the poskim do write that one should put soap on the bottom of the cup. Therefore, it goes straight to le'ibud. Any milk is going to go straight to le'ibud, and therefore it's minimizing any isurim, it's minimizing any prohibitions of Shabbos. And of course, there's so much more to discuss, and of course, every situation is different. So, the purpose of the shir is just to open people's minds to what shalos could be, what shalos to look out for, what to discuss. And I urge everybody to definitely consult with their own pesach, with their own Meidaidah, and just to get clarity and guidance on your personal situation. As I mentioned, Rabbi Zirkin, Olav Shalom, does have a beautiful, beautiful kuntras, which is made available for everybody. It's made available online, and it's definitely an excellent resource to look into. I want to wish everybody Hatzlacha Rabbi Muflaga and everything that they do. Kol Tov.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Kasimov. For the full article with extensive halachas compiled by Rabbi Zirkin, please visit mikveh.org/breastfeeding. Now for our next class on Kashrus, we will be continuing our series Egg Ed Part 4. Most of us use eggs in our cooking and baking on a daily basis, and each class we've had has been giving us clarity and knowledge on this topic. We're grateful to have Rabbi Nissan Zibell back with us tonight. Rabbi Zibell is the Kashrus administrator at the RCF Rabbinate of Central Florida and delivers classes to the general public on various Kashrus topics. He is also highly active in answering consumers' Kashrus questions on a daily basis. Thank you very much for being part of our program tonight.
Thank you very much for having me. Good evening, and we are going to be discussing Egg Ed Part 4. Last week we discussed various eggs that are found in the market that one could encounter and how to treat a blood spot found in them and how to go about and deal with it. This week we're going to continue a little bit discussing some more details on checking and finding blood spots, as well as who can check if there's a limit, age limit, or specific people that cannot do so, as well as discussing the idea of an egg pot, and if there's any specific number of eggs one should be cooking, and a little bit more as well, whatever we can cover on the topic tonight. But before there's something interesting article which I read, which potentially could be something one day an issue. So just it's good to be educated, to have your antennas up in case such thing does become an issue in the market. In short, it's that every day or all the time they're hatching eggs to become egg layers. There's specific chickens that are meant for egg laying, or they're best for egg laying due to that they don't eat too much. They basically lay a lot of eggs. So there's all the different advantages that they specifically have special egg layers. And these are different than the meat chickens. The meat chickens will grow faster, have a lot more flesh, and grow much faster. And they have their own advantages they develop, that they should have special chickens for meat. So when they have all these chickens being laid to be egg layers, to grow them up to lay eggs, about half of them are males, and a male chicken cannot lay eggs. So on day one, when the chick is born and hatched, they can't do much with that male chick because it's not the breed of chicken used for meat chickens. So they can't even put it towards meat chickens because it's going to be very different. It actually has not much flesh, and it's a very different type of chicken. And they obviously can't use it to lay eggs because it's a male. So unfortunately, what they do, they have to kill them. And every year, just in the US, is about 300 million baby chicks, male chicks, that are killed because they could not be used to lay eggs. And globally, they say it's about 6 billion or more baby males, chicks that are killed because they cannot be used. And there's no way to know what the eggs that were laid are going to be. So they basically have to wait till they hatch, and then they basically have different ways of telling which what they are, male or female. And obviously, this is many people have issue with that, and it's considered a big scandal. And already in 2016, the United Egg Producers said they're looking for a solution, and we're hoping to find the solution by 2020. And in 2020, they updated that they have not yet found the solution, but they're exploring the option of being able to test the eggs while they're still in the ovo, in the eggs, to see what they are, what gender they are, if they are male or female. And that didn't really develop, but in the past year, or already past year or so, it's been developed more and more, a system for this. And currently in Europe, it's already becoming very common that they have a machine that's able to scan the eggs that already started developing, and they can tell if it's a female that's being developed or a male. And the ones that are male are separated and are used, usually are either goes to waste or used for animal feed, and like that, they don't have to, it's not as cruel to wait till the egg develops and now is a live chick and then kill it. Instead, when it's still an egg in egg form, they will either dispose of it or use it for animal feed. And that is now coming to the US as well. There's 1 or 2 companies already in the US that are doing so, and they're gonna start doing it more and more. What does that mean practically? That means practically there's going to be 300 million eggs a year that are male eggs, which they're not waiting now for them to be developed and then kill them, but rather they're going to be using them for other things. But that may somehow recirculate in the market if with time people feel that throwing the eggs to waste or using them for animal feed is not doesn't make sense, and these eggs may somehow end up on the market again. Some people are concerned with that, and that would mean that there could be eggs on the market floating around that are actually a developing chick, which would bring us back to the whole sugya, the whole discussion of what the eggs were in Shulchan times Shulchan Aruch. The average egg was a fertilized egg, which was developing and not advanced, but a certain stage of it. But many others are saying that they would never recirculate these eggs into the markets once they're already starting to develop, and they know they're already developing. That would not happen, and no one has to be concerned that this will come in the market. But this is something developing and something to just be educated about and know to look out for. If anything, you may get some information to be educated about it. We did mention that there are the various eggs out there, and I don't know if we mentioned this, so I'll just make sure to mention it now. It does exist in some states eggs that are called fertilized eggs, and they will clearly say on the carton fertile or fertilized, and those will be very clear, and as well they'll be much more significantly priced. They'll cost a lot more, and one will know in such a case. It'll be very clear, and one will know. And if they do have such eggs, again, no issue whatsoever with dealing with eating such eggs. Just realizing that halachically, if blood is found, it may have a different ramifications than if was unfertilized eggs. Regarding where the blood is found, is there a difference if it's found only in the white or if it's found only in the yellow? So there's actually a discussion in Shulchan Aruch. The Mechaber, the author of Shulchan Aruch, he writes, if the blood spot is found just in the white and the albumin, the egg is definitely not a developing chick, and only that blood spot is an issue, and it could be removed, and the rest of the egg is fine. However, if it's found in the yellow, then in the yolk, then it's clearly that means it's a developing chick. Obviously, again, dealing with an egg that's fertilized. The Ramah, however, what Ashkenazim follow, disagrees and says whether the blood spot is found in the yellow or if it's found in the white and the albumin, either way, if it's a fertilized egg, we assume it's a developing chick and the whole egg is forbidden. So practically speaking, again, this is for fertilized eggs. It would not make a difference for Ashkenazim, but for Sephardim it would make a difference. However, when it comes to non-fertilized eggs, like the eggs that we have, most common eggs today, either whether you find it in the yellow or in the white, the egg is permissible, unless and all you have to do is remove that red spot, unless there's a real concern, like Rabbi Moshe Feinstein mentioned, that there's a concern that fertilized eggs are mixed back in. Then one would be caution to be more careful and throw out the egg, but that was something we already discussed in previous classes, how to go about for that. So in regards to having an egg pot, there is such a minhag. It's not something that's mentioned in Halachos per se, that one has to do so. It was a minhag to help your average person, that basically, if we're dealing with fertilized eggs, and one of the eggs, they found blood in it, that means it was actually a developing chick. In such a case, the entire egg is usur. It's not just a drop of blood. The whole egg is a dead developing chick. In such a case, if someone boiled the eggs in a pot, usually there's not going to be enough water to make the entire egg be nullified. It's not going to be 60 times more. And now this pot that had in it a whole egg, which was not kosher, becomes not kosher. If you're using a regular pot in your kitchen, you now have to wait 24 hours. And then after 24 hours, are you able to go and kosher the pot? And this would, if someone would be using a regular pot, this would maybe paralyze them for 24 hours. They can't use the pot. So it was a suggested Eitz Tova, a good suggestion that was developed into a minhag that if one has an egg pot, and if that egg ended up being not kosher and the pot became not kosher, put it aside and you'll wait 24 hours, but it's not going to affect the flow of your kitchen because that was a pot just for eggs, and you don't have to be concerned with that. All this, first of all, was not an obligation, and it's a minhag that developed out of, again, Eitz Tova, a good practice to help you have a smoother experience in the kitchen when eggs were fertilized. When eggs are not fertilized, this is again nothing to do with Pesach. Pesach is a whole different reason to have a egg pot having to do with chametz, and we're not going to discuss that. That'll be a different time when we discuss Pesach. However, when it comes to unfertilized eggs, like the common eggs today, only the blood spot is an issue. Usually that blood spot is already bottled within the egg. There's already usually 60 times more egg than that blood spot. Even if not, when you're cooking an egg, boiling an egg with the water and with the pot, usually will have 60 times more than that blood spot. So the pot will never be affected by the egg if it's a non-fertilized egg. Even if you ended up finding blood in it, the pot would remain kosher. So today, if someone's only using regular eggs that are not fertilized, the idea of a pot is not relevant anymore because the pot would never get affected by it, even if the egg had blood in it. So practically speaking today, if somebody's only using the regular eggs, non-fertilized eggs, there technically be no use for such a pot, although some still want to hold on to a minhag that they had in their family and continue using an egg pot. And obviously, one should, speak to their Rav, Mashpia, how to go about if they have been doing so, and they want to stop, or if they should continue. Obviously, this is a decision that one should make with their personal Rav, but we're just explaining the idea behind it. When it comes to the amount of eggs to cook, going back to this issue, in the olden days, since the average egg was fertilized, an entire egg, if blood was found, the entire egg would be usur. Basically, the way to save the pot, if someone did not have an egg pot, or someone did not want to have to kasher a pot, the way to save it was to cook a minimum of 3 eggs. By having 3, assuming that only one of those 3 eggs will have a blood spot, then you have 2 against 1. It's called batal berayv. In halacha, sometimes something can be batal if majority you have more mutter against the what's usur. So over here you have 1 egg that's usur and 2 that's mutter. It will become batal berayv, and it's discussed in halachic authorities how that would work. And since it would become batal, the pot would not be affected, and the other 2 eggs would not be affected. And all you have to do is just remove the forbidden egg, and everything else is fine. And this was another solution to basically not affect your pot. And if someone didn't have an egg pot, or someone didn't want to have to kasher their egg pot, you put a minimum of 3, and like that you have 2 against 1. If one of them had blood spot, that was that. And that was a solution again for the times when people were using fertilized eggs. Today, that our eggs are now fertilized, as one who's using non-fertilized eggs, the blood usually is already bottled within the egg if there was anything, and you don't have to have another 2 eggs to become batal berayv and all that. So today, the idea of doing at least 3 would not in any way be applicable, unless one is specifically doing it to continue a family minhag. And again, one should confirm with their Rav Mashpia if they would want to stop, and or if they should continue to have such a minhag. From this developed a myth that one cannot cook an odd number of eggs, and rather the number of eggs has to be even. However, that's not in any way accurate. This has no source in halacha. Even the idea of cooking 3 eggs is also just an eitz teva. It's a good advice to save you from making the pot become not kosher or the eggs, but it's not a requirement in halacha. And this idea of not having not cooking an odd number does not have any source. Where it developed from is that people were trying to always cook at least 3 eggs, and it became a thing. You have to have an odd number, really. You have to have an even number, or specifically not cooking, specifically having 3. So that's the only idea. But to always have an odd number is not something which would work. So if somebody would be cooking one egg, which is an odd number, it would basically make their pot not kosher based on this whole advice. But they're doing an odd number. But the idea really has nothing to do with the odd number. The idea is specifically 3 and up. Once you're doing 3, you could do 4, you could do 5, you could do 6. There's no issue doing even if it's more than 3. In regards to one more thing, which we already mentioned in detail, we'll discuss in detail when it comes to eggs. Once eggs are cracked, once eggs are peeled, there could be a whole issue of sakana overnight. There was a whole class for itself, and the harmful foods, which one could look over there for more details. In regards to who can check for eggs, can a child check for eggs? How about someone who's not Jewish, a non-Jewish help in the house, or someone who's not from? How does it work for these things? So going back to the source that we mentioned, checking for eggs, even if they are fertilized eggs, is a minhag and is not an obligation, as Shulchan Aruch clearly says. So once we have that understanding, we can understand what extent is needed, or expertise is needed, or trust is needed to check eggs. So when it comes to a child, we are told that when it comes to chiyuvei d'Rabbanan, obligations that are on a rabbinic level, for example, b'dikas chametz, a child could be trusted if the task is not a laborious task, if it's not too much labor involved. Then in such a case, one could trust a child if it's a rabbinic matter. If it's a deraisa, a child cannot be trusted. But if it's a rabbinic matter, if there's not too much labor involved, a child could be trusted. However, if there is more significant labor involved, then l'chatchila one should not trust a child. But the Ebed, many say it's fine. This is all regarding a chiyuv d'Rabbanan. When it comes to checking eggs, it's not even a chiyuv d'Rabbanan. It's not a rabbinic obligation. It's a minhag. So based on that, if the child knows how to identify what looks like blood and you teach them how to look at it, there'd be no issue and it would be fine because first of all, it doesn't have too much labor involved, and also it's a minhag, so it doesn't even have the restrictions that a chiyuv d'Rabbanan would have, a rabbinic obligation would have, so that's fine. In regards to a non-from person, generally a non-from person has no ne'emanus when it comes to matters of kashrus. Since they themselves are not living a life with value that values details of halacha. However, in such a case, when it comes to something that's a minhag, if one knows that this person cares very much about kashrus and is a very trustworthy person in general, if you ask them if there's any blood, they should let you know. There may be fine, but one should obviously speak to their Rav to see how to go about in such a case. But halachically, there's a lot of room to say that it would be fine to trust such a person. However, this may have other ramifications. If they feel like you're giving them trust in this area, they may feel more comfortable in the kitchen. Other things may happen which would already be problematic. When it comes to asking a guy to check for eggs, there are some that want to suggest that if you give the guy a reward, since again this is a minhag and there's no obligation to check, but we want to still fulfill the minhag of the eggs being checked, if you give the guy a reward like $5 or even $1, if he finds a blood spot, that's enough of an incentive that will say that he's going to look for the blood, and if he'll find one, he'll for sure let us know, and that would work. Others don't feel comfortable with that, but practically speaking, many hashgachas, like the national hashgachas, like the OU and the Chavke and others, will rely on that in a busy kitchen. They rather have the mashgiach focus on more important things, properly checking lettuce and properly checking products coming into the kitchen, properly being on top of fires being turned on, and instead we'll have one of the non-Jewish workers check the eggs. That is common, and even if someone would be particular in their house not to trust their non-Jewish worker, and particularly only want a Jew to check, there is definitely what to rely on when you're going to be going out, to not have to start inquiring whether they had a non-Jew check the eggs or not, because again, we're dealing with something which is a minhag, which is not an obligation even to check. And if the hashgacha has a system in place, it's definitely something one can rely on and not have to avoid. And we'll stop here for this week. Thank you very much for having me. and all the best.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Zibell. Okay, now we're going to put a coin in the pushka, and we're going to say the Rebbe's Kapitel together, as well as Kapitel Chaf for Eretz Yisrael. Shir HaMalais LeDavid, Lolei Adonai Shehayalanu Yomer Na Yisrael. Lolei Adonai Shehayalanu B'kum Aleinu Adam. Azai Chayim B'lo'onu B'charais Apam Banu. Azai HaMayim Shetofonu Nachla Avar Al Nafshenu. Azai Avar Al Nafshenu HaMayim Hazeidonim. Baruch Adonai Shaloi Nasananu Teref L'Shinehem. Nafshenu Kitzipa Nimlata, Mipach Yoichim HaPach Nishbar, V'anachnu Nimlotnu. Ezreinu b'shem Adonai, Eisei Shamayim v'aretz. Now we'll say together Kapitel Chaf for continued safety in Eretz Yisrael. Lamnatzeach mizmar LeDavid, Yancha Adonai b'yom tzara, Yisagev Hashem Elehei Yaakov. Yishlach ezocha mikaydesh u'mitzion yisadeka. Yizkar kol min chaysecha v'ailascha yadashna sela. Yiten lecha chel vavecha v'chal atzascha yimale. Niranana b'shuasecha v'shem aleheina nidgal, yamale Adonai kol mishalesecha. Ata yadati ki hashi Adonai mashichai, yanehu mishmei kadshai, b'gvores yesha yaminai. Ele v'recha v'ele v'asusim v'anachnu b'shem Adonai aleheinu nazkir. Hey makaru v'nafalo v'anachnu kamnu v'nisaydad, Adonai hashia hamelech yanenu v'yom karenu. The Mashiach thought for today, just as one must remember and prepare for Shabbos on the weekday, so too in the weekday of Golus, Yidden must remember and prepare for Shabbos, the future Geula. And this remembrance and preparation for the Geula makes our avodah in Golus that much easier, since we know that Mashiach is coming very soon and therefore prepare for his coming. Quick reminders. If you appreciate these classes, share them with your friends and family. All playbacks are available on mikvah.org/power hour and also on all podcast platforms as well as 24/6. Search us up as Project Chana Power Hour. If you have questions on the classes or would like to dedicate a week of learning in honor or le'ulei nishma someone, please reach out to us on our email, projectchanapowerhour@gmail.com. May our learning prepare us and our homes and bring every Jew home to Eretz Yisrael with Mashiach now. Thank you for joining.